demand unit here at the IEA. This is the second of 2 webinars out of 4 that we will be hosting on buildings. Today's subject is capacity building and construction transformation in emerging economies. Yesterday's kickoff webinar was the first, as I mentioned, of 4. The objective of this series is to seek advice from key global building stakeholders in the development of the IEA's new initiative for sustainable buildings. A key focus of this partnership is to raise the importance of building energy efficiency among high-level energy policy directors, while also providing the fundamental analysis to support more investment from both the public and private sectors. For those of you joining, we will have 5 speakers with us today. I will introduce briefly. If you are interested in reading more about the bios of the speakers or downloading the webinar agenda, you can go to the IEA website at iea.org under Newsroom and Events and then Workshops. There's also information on the workshop that was held yesterday, as well as the 3rd workshop, which will be held June 10th. So to start, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Marc Lafrance, who's going to give a brief introduction about the buildings program here.
Okay, thank you, John, and welcome everyone for joining the webinar today. So I guess one thing I'd like to see is if you were on the webinar yesterday, we know the time zones are quite different, but it's best for the European market for the both webinars. But if you were on the webinar yesterday, if you could raise your hand on the function, that would be just helpful for us to see whether or not how many people were here yesterday. And so overall, we're trying to do these webinars so that we can improve our communication with our stakeholder group. And the key element is to get feedback on potential new projects and activities. And we're really glad today to have Melanie Slade. She is actually heading up our new Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies program at the IEA. She's got a very extensive bio on working on energy efficiency policy in multiple countries around the world, including UK, China, and most recently Australia. So I'd like to welcome Melanie to give us an overview of the top-level perspectives on the activities that we're going to be doing at the IEA for the emerging economies. And of course, from the buildings program, we'd like to support her and work along with her in some of these activities. So please welcome Melanie.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. As Mark says, I'm here to manage a new program called Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies. It's a 4-year program that was launched at the beginning of this year. So we're just starting to get going with our as many of you will know, the IEA has done lots of activities in emerging economies in non-member countries in the past, but they have been individual activities that have been quite ad hoc in nature. And the idea of this new program is that we'll be able to take a much more strategic approach to our work in emerging economies. And given that we have a 4-year time horizon, we know that we can plan an extended series of activities in our partner countries. Our goal in these programs is to generate economy-wide benefits for emerging economies through energy efficiency. And we understand that we all have different motivations for our energy efficiency projects. So, some people it will be saving money. Some people it will be climate change. For others it will be new jobs. And for others it will be using scarce energy supplies as efficiently as possible and as productively as possible. So we're very conscious that we all have these different motivations and want to take that into account in this new program. We envisage 3 levels of engagement on the program. So we might work with an individual country to do some very specific analysis on energy efficiency in some respect. For example, we might look at energy efficiency indicators in some countries, or we might look at analysing the benefits a country could accrue through efficient transport policy. So very specific ideas. We might also look at multi-country projects where we perhaps would work with a regional bloc like Latin American countries or ASEAN impact, where we could work together to try to communicate energy efficiency activities that might be of benefit to a region and get collaborative working happening. We want to make sure that we engage with officials from the partner countries, both at a national level and at a local level, if that's effective. We need to make sure we work with energy efficiency networks around the world, and we are very keen to work with other partners. So we have ideas of where we might be working with organisations like the World Bank, or with some of the bilateral organisations who work in energy efficiency. We'd look to work with any partners who would welcome IEA expertise, and where we think that that would further energy efficiency uptake in the partner countries. So, in terms of the types of activities that we're looking to initiate, clearly we want to target important strategic areas. We want to make sure that we end up with a portfolio of projects that covers all aspects of energy efficiency. So we will have buildings projects and transport projects, equipment energy efficiency and industrial projects. We're also interested in taking a more integrated approach, so that we might look at all of these things within the context of an urban environment. So we want to take a portfolio approach of activities. This programme will be demand driven, so it's essential that the governments of the countries where we want to work are actually asking for our assistance and wanting to work with us. We're looking for a range of activities, some small things that we can do now and do quickly, and other things that we can do which will take a longer term look at things. So, as I said earlier, we have a 4-year horizon for this programme. In the first instance, the countries where we expect to work will be Mexico, South Africa, China and India, hopefully. We're also keen to work with Indonesia and some of the other large ASEAN economies, and we expect to build up a portfolio in some of the large Latin American countries as well. But like I say, this will be based on whether or not we, when we talk to governments, we can find areas where we think IEA expertise will add value to processes that are already happening. Being very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of activity going on in energy efficiency around the world, we want to make sure that we add value to that process. So I'm going to stop there. This is early days for the programme, and we're very happy to keep people informed as to the work plans as they progress. So thank you.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you very much, Melanie. For those of you who are just joining or who haven't participated in our webinars before, we will now have some question time. You can raise questions in 2 ways. First is to raise your hand using the hand button on your GoToMeeting screen. The other way is to also write in a question, which you can do under the bar on your screen. And we'll wait for a couple to come in and then take some before going on to our next presentation.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is Mark LaFrance, and I'll go through the next presentation. Then if you have any general questions about the IEA, Melanie and I can respond to them. So if anybody was on the webinar yesterday, this is the same presentation, but I will be providing a few nuances relative to the APEC market and the ASEAN areas, emerging economies. So last year in 2013, we had a very productive year for the buildings activity here at the IEA. We put out 3 major publications. I'll talk more about these in the presentation. Okay, so this presentation is going to include a general overview of what we're doing at the IEA in buildings. We'll talk about what we see as some of the key policies and technologies. We'll talk about how we're trying to build and expand our relationship with stakeholders and partners. And then we'll talk about our most recent publications for ETP 2014 and the Clean Energy Ministerial Tracking Report that we issued last week. and then also about how do we move forward with our stakeholders. We also have, you should have received an evaluation form in Excel. So we want you to fill that out at the end of the meeting and send it back to us so we can improve the quality of our webinars as we move forward. Well, for most people involved in the buildings sector realize that this is a huge sector for energy consumption. We're never going to address climate change or energy security concerns in the world if we don't reduce our demand in the building sector. Large amounts of electricity, big impact on carbon emissions, but also many markets around the world have had deterioration in their economy and high unemployment, and this can be linked to the building sector. So when we can reinvigorate the building sector, we also can improve economic prosperity through job creation. We're looking at adding 2.5 billion people to the planet by 2050. All of them are going to want to be in a comfortable dwelling and in a secure dwelling. It's going to really increase our demand. And for the OECD areas, we're looking at 75 to 90% of the building stock still being in place, which means we also have to do deep renovation for existing markets. So this is we call this the buildings book, or the transition to sustainable buildings. This really lays out our overall strategy of how we're going to reduce consumption in the building sector. It includes global as well as 9 regional regions for energy forecasting and energy savings predictions, as well as 3 technical chapters, one on building envelope, one on heating and cooling, including solar thermal, and then we have an appliance lighting in the cooking chapter, and the last chapter of the book is a comprehensive policies chapter about all of the things you need to know about policy. So here's the chart of the regions at the bottom. You can see the 9 regions of the world that we've analyzed. We actually have recommendations and a separate subsection for each region, so it's quite detailed, and you can see what we predict, for example, for floor area growth and energy savings. Okay, so this chart basically is what we consider to be the top 2 key technology and policy priorities for the 9 regions. Now, almost every element on this chart is important and could be worked on, but we tried to say, okay, what would be the absolute highest? And so yesterday's webinar, we addressed 3 elements. We looked at zero energy buildings, which is mostly important for the more mature markets. We looked at heat pumps, which is a high priority for Europe, and then we looked at appliance and labeling standards, which is really critical for most regions of the world to continue. So, and today we're going to talk more about, how do we impact the construction in emerging markets and the capacity building, so that, how do we do the building codes and all of the things that go into advanced construction. So in the policy chapter, we talk about how we need to put all of the policies together so we have a consistent process of transforming the market. Traditionally, it takes 20 to 30 years. In some cases, we have technology that was developed 40 years ago that still is not mature. And the whole idea is how do we accelerate the process of going from new innovative technology all the way through mandatory policies, whether they be building codes or equipment performance standards, and really accelerate this process so that we can address the large growth in construction and all of the equipment that's going to be manufactured. We want that to be as efficient as possible, otherwise it's a lost opportunity. This chart shows how we're going to transform the construction from very inefficient buildings. I know on this chart you might be having a difficulty seeing the fine print, but hopefully when you download all of the presentations you'll be able to see it without a problem. But basically there's large amounts of stock in the world that are very inefficient. Even new construction in many regions of the world is still very inefficient. And then the middle category is what we would consider to be like an advanced building or advanced building codes in typically Northern Europe and Northern North America. And we're seeing obviously some niche construction of that in different regions of the world. But we want that to become the norm everywhere. And then on the right side of the chart, we're trying to move towards zero energy buildings. So although people can work on zero energy buildings in every region of the world, in emerging markets we're really trying to get all of the advanced technologies and building systems to be mature, cost-effective, manufactured locally or regionally so that they can become viable. And then, of course, we can move towards zero energy buildings. It's okay to do a demonstration, zero energy building, in an emerging market, but most likely the biggest activity is to get the everyday construction to a higher level. And in places like Europe, they're actually pursuing zero energy building policies to become mandatory by the end of the decade. And there's a lot of work to be done to do that. Okay, so we issued our building envelope roadmap, which is kind of the framework for how we transform the construction market from an economic, a technology, and a policy perspective. We also conducted advanced building materials and systems perspectives for 12 regions of the world. And we also went further and looked at the testing and rating mechanism assessment. So that's available. And then we also included policy criteria so that if you're going to try to transform your construction industry, you need to have various policies in place, such as governance, energy pricing strategies that are going to encourage investment in energy efficient buildings. And while we provided our assessment for the 12 regions, we want really every country and every region using this established criteria to do their own self-evaluations to see where can they improve their policies to pursue advanced construction. Okay, we also issued an advanced policy pathway to how do you pursue building codes on a systematic level. The key element of this is to drive towards the zero energy buildings, but it goes beyond just advanced policies and technologies. It says, okay, how do we learn to live within a more sustainable way? So can we live in warmer temperatures if we don't, if we dress appropriately, if we try to be more conscious of the environment? And so mostly this is geared towards some of the more advanced regions, but certainly there's lots of elements in here that can be applied to every region of the world for improving the building codes. So another great resource, this was actually done by a colleague, Yamina Sahib, that was here at the IEA. So that was one of our 3 key documents. Now this slide is kind of a framework slide just to explain where the IEA's core expertise lies in our extensive energy balance database, where we have I think over 130 countries of the world. We also have started an energy efficiency indicators database for mostly our member countries and some of the larger member countries. And so we also, of course, do our modeling activity. And so that's kind of our core expertise, is our data and our analysis. But we really want to work with a much larger group of partners, and we do so already, but we want to expand this. We want to get more, we want to have a more effective and a more far-reaching buildings activity. And to do that, we need to work with lots of stakeholders. And the question is how can we bring people together to drive the market? One of the key elements is to make sure that we work with the leading other activities around the world and organizations such as IP and things, the Clean Energy Ministerial, UNEP, and the major economic forums. Lots of organizations that are doing things. We want to work along with them as well. So looking at our core data and analysis, this is really the subject of webinar 4. So I'm just going to touch base on this briefly here. But we have a comprehensive buildings model that addresses 31 countries or regions of the world, and it's a hybrid between an econometric model and a stock and flow model, where we look at saturation rates for appliances and the stock flow of the building stock. And we basically, like I said before, we want to work with various organizations to improve the quality of the data and to improve the analysis, and looking at various forecasts of how we can affect policy better. So this coming year, what we're mostly working on is improving our model, which we're going This includes looking at the key drivers such as sensitivity around the floor area or the floor area per per capita, as well as the density of the number of people per household, and trying to do a better job of forecasting that, and then looking at sensitivities relative to whether that were to increase or decrease based on policy. We also are going to do a thorough review of our inputs and our assumptions, and we also want to improve our thermal model to do things such as deep renovation and also the integration with other sectors such as transport, and a key element is on-site power generation through combined heat and power. We're also working on a paper with Tsinghua University that deals with the building demand and solutions, and where a lot of our time this year is going to be building the partnership, working with lots of stakeholders and partners. Oh, sorry, I went too fast here. Okay, so here's a potential list of new projects that we could be working on, depending on feedback from stakeholders. And so this is not in a priority order, but it just provides several examples. The first is, while people the feedback from the building envelope has been very positive, people have talked about how do we implement this in a particular country or region. And so one of the things that we could consider doing in partnership with a key local group of partners would be to work on implementation plans. And the two countries that come to mind, of course, are China and India, due to the large population and large construction growth expected. But if we were to do something like this, we could expand that to other regions of the world. There's also some interest within the European Union about how do we, is there a role that the IEA could play on analyzing and making recommendations for the upcoming Energy Performance Buildings Directive, which is far-reaching. There's lots of excellent vision and focus for low-energy buildings, but there's not that much activity right now as to how do we plan for that update, and the IEA could play a leading role there with various organizations. The IEA has also done a lot of work on what we call multiple benefits that go beyond energy efficiency, such as health, and one of the key elements for the building sector really is job creation. Should we do more analysis on the building sector on various types of policies, technologies, and what would that mean for job creation? There's also some interest in doing more for our ETP 2015 publication on the innovation theme, and in support of COP21 in Paris next year, although anything that we do would have to be pretty limited because of the time frame, but certainly it's something we would consider. And then the last key element, which is the subject of today's webinar, is capacity building in emerging markets, and working with the E4 program, as Melanie has explained, and what role we could play in there for that activity. And yesterday's webinar, there was an additional element mentioned about the IEA should get involved with building materials standardization, or working on ways that we can harmonize performance standards for equipment and products to help foster innovation and investment in the building sector. So these items are just presented here. If you have interest in these items, please give us that as a feedback. If you have new items you'd like to add, please suggest that on the evaluation form. But the main subject of webinar 3 will be to dig into these items in detail and discuss what the elements would be, what would be the activities, and present that for more robust discussion, along with any key findings coming out of yesterday and today's webinars that people may suggest to us. Okay, so last week we issued the Energy Technology Perspectives 2014 document. This is where we present our core estimates for building energy efficiency savings to achieve a 2-degree scenario, or 450 parts per million carbon concentration. And beyond our basic forecasting for the building sector, we also did an additional project on looking at what if we did high electrification in 2 regions of the world, for Europe and China, for a greater share of heat pumps, for basically a fuel switching from gas to electricity. In the case of Europe, it would be to reduce the very large demand for natural gas especially since they have a lack of domestic resources. And in the case of China, it would be to reduce the growth in natural gas. Now, for those of you that are watching the news, yesterday we heard of this new contract from China with Russia. Obviously, they're planning on using a lot of natural gas, and that's certainly better than coal. The question here is if even if you generated the electricity with natural gas, you still could use the electricity in a heat pump to get a much better thermal performance. So having a natural gas supply for electricity and using heat pumps is fully compatible for a more efficient economy. But anyway, these detailed results were presented last week at the 11th Heat Pump Conference in Montreal, and that presentation will be available, but we're not going into the details today. And yesterday, the European Union did present details on how they would promote heat pumps in Europe and expand the market. So those materials will be available for people to review. We also did our Clean Energy Ministerial Tracking Report for 2014 last week, and we in that report, this is available for free from the link below, or if you just go to the IEA webpage and look at the publications, free publications, it comes right up. There's three main elements in the report for buildings. We have buildings as kind of a whole system or a whole building perspective. We consider that to be not on track. We're not making enough progress on very low energy buildings. We're not making enough progress on deep renovations. We also have a building envelope report where we talk about the key elements that need to be pursued for transforming construction in all regions of the world. We don't believe that that's on track. We've made some significant progress on building codes in a few regions of the world, but the vast majority of buildings are still underinvested for building envelope. And the last area is appliances and equipment, which deals with standards and labeling. And we feel as if this one has made some decent progress. We call it improvement needed, which is another way of saying that we've made decent progress, but we're not good enough. We need more activity, more funding, and more investment. Okay, so webinars 3 and 4. We've actually set the time for webinar 3, which is June 10th at 1:30 Paris time. We think we can get many people from the world at this time. It's not ideal for everybody. We know that many people from Asia will be very late, and people from the North America will be very early, or people on the West Coast, North America, will probably be impossible. But all of these webinars will be recorded for reference. And then for webinar 4, this is going to be more the modeling, peer review, and the data assumptions. We still haven't set a date yet. Potentially June 23rd or 25th is possible. Okay, that's my contact information, and we have some links so you can download the documents. This presentation will be available along with everybody else's on the web. There's just additional slides to show some other resources. So with that, I think we have time for a few questions. If you have any questions for Melanie as well on the emerging economies activity, that would be great. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mark. And as I mentioned, for any of you who may just be joining, there are two ways to raise a question. One is to use the hand button to raise your hand and speak vocally to us. The second is to type your question in under the question tab on your GoToMeeting. While we're waiting for any possible questions, I'd also like to draw your attention again to the IEA website, where information about today's workshop and yesterday's workshop is available online under iea.org, newsroom and events, and then workshops. You can also find, it will be posted soon, the presentations from yesterday's workshop, and later the workshop presentations from today will be online. The information that Mark presented during his presentation, including the buildings book and ETB 2014, are also available online if you go to IEA Publications. And the technology roadmap and policy pathway, both are online for free for download. Okay. We have one logistical question coming in from Chen about copying the HTTP address. Chen, I'm assuming that you mean how to get online for the addresses for the webinar information. This can be found at www.iea.org. And then if you click on the Newsroom and Event tab, and directly under that, Workshops, all the information should be available.
And if you have any problems at all, just email us and we'll get you the link directly on an email.
All right, so it looks like we have no questions now. Just please be aware, if you'd like to raise a question, you don't have to wait to the end. You can always type it in to me, and we will try to address it at the end of the presentations. We also will have time at the end of today's presentations to take questions and comments then. Our next speaker is coming in from Indonesia. Andrea Phoebe Misna works is the Deputy Director for Technical Guidance, Energy Conservation, and Cooperation for the Director of Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation within the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. She works on energy efficiency issues, especially in the building sector there, and will be joining us today to speak about some of the energy efficiency policies that are happening in Indonesia. We did have some difficulty before on the connection, so Phoebe, I'm going to unmute you now, and if you could just let us know if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you, John. Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. So we'll give you control of the presentation, and if you just scroll your mouse, you should be able to go through it.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. In this opportunity, I would like to share with you all about energy efficiency of building in Indonesia. Sorry, I cannot scroll the slide. Could you help me? Sorry. Hello, John?
It's okay. We've moved to the next slide. Is this okay?
Okay. Okay, thank you. We will start with the background. I will briefly show you about the energy demand and supply in Indonesia. After that, I will share some policy and regulation on energy efficiency in building, as well as some programs have been done to implement energy efficiency in building sector in Indonesia. And last, I will show you some barrier and capacity building needed to accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency in building sector in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Sorry, can you move to the next slide? I will on next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Similar to the other developing country, energy demand growth in Indonesia continue to increase to support the economic growth as well as population growth. Currently, energy demand growth is around, sorry, can you move to the slide number 4? Page 4, please. Sorry.
Phoebe, it looks like you have control, actually. So
Page 4. Page 4, please. Okay, good. Similar to the other developing countries, energy demand growth in Indonesia continue to increase to support the economic growth as well as population growth. Currently, energy demand growth is around 7.1% to support economic growth and population growth at 6.1% and 1.1% respectively. Next slide, please.
Phoebe, it seems as if you're able to control it now. So if you can control it yourself, or we can do it, but whichever one you want. So right now you're on slide 6.
Okay.
Or 7 now.
5
You're
now.
doing this, right? So you're controlling it, right, Phoebe?
I'll try it.
Oh yeah. Sometimes there's a little delay, so when you change it, you have to wait a second or two, and maybe that's what's causing the concern. So sorry about that, but just be patient, and you can control it. Okay, it seems like you're going back now. So.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay. I think people understand. They're going to be patient. But thank you.
Sorry. Okay. When we see the supply side, fossil fuels still play an important role. Almost 95% of energy need met by fossil fuel dominated by oil, around 46%, followed by coal 29% and gas 21%. The utilization of renewable energy is still low, it's less than 5%. Now we move to the final energy consumption. The bigger consumer is industry and transportation sector. However, the commercial sector, which is include building sector, tend to increase. You can see the green line. Its condition also encouraged by economic development. Number of new buildings emerged, such as new mall, hotel, hospital, airport, condominium, etc. When we see the energy intensity in commercial building, it seems that a lot of room to improve energy efficiency in building sectors. The figures show the comparison of energy intensity in Indonesia and Japan for different functions of building. The potential of energy saving varies from 25 to 35%. Sorry, it's quite delayed. And now we move to the policy and regulation. We already have some policy and regulation on energy conservation, such as law, government regulation, and presidential and ministerial decree. However, I cannot describe all of those in this time. So in this opportunity, I only would like to share that we already have law on building and its derivative regulation, which mentioned that technical design of building should consider the national standard on energy efficiency in building. The standard that we have now, among others, are energy conservation for building and FAB that determine the OTTV and RTTV of the building should be around or less than 35 watt per meter square. And that regulate the temperature of the room should be set around 24 to 27 Celsius degree, with the humidity around 60% plus minus 5%. And the other standard is energy conservation for lighting system that determine the standard of lighting intensity for the office, residential, hospital, mall, etc. And we also have the standard for energy audit procedure for building. In the local level, the governor of DKI Jakarta also has issued the regulation on green building, which also consider on energy efficiency beside the other aspects such as water efficiency, indoor air quality, waste and soil treatment, and also construction activity. Next slide, we will talk about the program that we have implemented to encourage the implementation of energy efficiency. Some program that we have now is increasing awareness on energy efficiency through the campaign, seminar, workshop, advertising, and etc. We also conduct a national energy efficiency competition with the category of new and existing building, retrofitted building, as well as the implementation of energy management in the buildings. The objective of this activity is to encourage the stakeholder and the user to implement energy efficiency, as well as to give appreciation to the stakeholder that already implemented energy efficiency. The other program that we have is providing free energy audit under Energy Conservation Partnership Program. It is a kind of incentive provided by the government to encourage the stakeholder to implement energy efficiency. The third program is certification of energy manager and energy auditor. The objective of this program is to standardize the competency of energy manager and energy auditors. And then we also develop the guideline of energy efficiency in building. We developed 3 series guidelines. The first one is for developer or builder and building owners. And the second guideline is for the engineer. And the third one, the case study of energy efficiency in building. And we also have some pilot project on energy efficiency in building. This is the result of free energy audit in building in 2013. The number of building audited is are around 60 buildings, consists of hotel 17 units, hospital 6 units, mall 3 units, and government office and university around 35 units. The highest energy saving potential is in hospital around 27.5%, followed by government office 26.3%. This is some recommendation provided by the energy auditor for energy saving in the building. I will not read it one by one, but in general they give the recommendation on active design and passive design. This is the pilot project of low energy office that we have. This is our room office, and under cooperation with Danida, we retrofitted this room to be demonstration project of low energy office. We replaced the window from single glass to double glass and replaced the lamp with the efficient one and also the air conditioning. We also installed monitoring system for electricity use in this room. This is the pictures of the room before and after retrofitted. This room is very comfort compared to after retrofit. The room is become more comfort than before. Okay, this is the another picture, and then this is the result of the retrofit. And after we retrofit this space, so the energy consumption is reducing from 170 kilowatt hour per meter square per year to be 80 kilowatt hour per meter square per year, and the comfortability also increased. And I also would like to share that the Sin Green Building Indonesia established a few years ago. Many building owners are attracted to have the Green Building Certificate. One of the building is a new office of Ministry of Public Works that got the Platinum certificate with energy efficiency index around 145 kilowatt hour per meter persegi per year. And when we are talking about the barrier, there is some barrier that we face. The first one is fossil fuel subsidy, and the second one is lack of energy saving awareness, lack of knowledge on energy efficiency in building sector, and then high initial investment for energy efficiency technology, and a lack of smart financing mechanism for energy efficiency project. And to overcome the barrier, so we should remove the subsidy, and currently the government of Indonesia already had commitment to reduce the subsidy gradually. So I think it is a good challenge for us to increase the implementation of energy efficiency. And also increase the awareness on energy efficiency through several programs. We also try to improve the capacity and knowledge on energy efficiency in building sector and strengthening research and development on energy efficiency technology. And we also would like to accelerate the market transformation through smart financing mechanism on energy efficiency project. All of this program, we need the capacity building for all stakeholders. And for this opportunity, I would like to propose the assistant from the IEA that we would like to increase the capacity of energy efficiency in Indonesia, and we focus on developing regulation. We would like to review the current standard of energy efficiency in building that have been issued and look at what kind of building code that have been mandated in Indonesia. And then we also would like to have sharing best practice with other countries on energy efficiency in building and improve the capacity building of policymakers in national and local level in developing policy regulation on building energy performance, such as labeling and certificate, building codes, maps, net zero energy consumption in building through workshop, training, etc. Thank you. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Phoebe. And for those of you listening, we again have time for some questions now if you would like to raise your hand or type them in.
Okay, thank you, Phoebe. This is Mark LaFrance for everybody. So that was an excellent presentation, and it's really nice to see that you've been successful on moving ahead on various buildings and projects and starting to get some policies. I thought it was pretty interesting to see in a commercial building application where you're getting the building down to 80 kilowatt hours per square meter, which is quite good. And I think also one of the things that you've talked in the past about is the challenge when we try to do that throughout the economy. If you still have some fuel subsidies in place, it's a challenge on how do you transform the market, because of course there's social issues involved, and it's beyond the technology and the energy efficiency opportunities. It goes into that. So I think one of the elements of capacity building goes from some of the expertise on policies and technologies, but also on looking at how economies can transform their governance and the energy subsidy and all of that. So anyway, I think that's some good items that we can work forward on. So I'll turn it over to John. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Phoebe, we have a question coming in from a former colleague. Good morning, Hiro. Hiro Yamada used to work with us here on ETP. He is asking on slide 6 of your presentation that the energy consumption in both the residential and commercial sectors in Indonesia has looked relatively flat for the last 10 years or so. Is there an explanation for this? And if so, could you explain possibly?
Pardon, regarding the energy efficiency in the residential area?
No, the overall energy consumption in both the residential and commercial sectors looks relatively flat, but you've had strong economic and population growth. So is this due to energy efficiency?
I'm not sure about that. From this figure we can see that the energy consumption for the household and also from the commercial is quite, but the commercial is increased, even it's slightly increased. For the household it also increased, but not too much, I think. For the energy efficiency, maybe in some area, particularly in big city, maybe yes, but for the local area, I think it's not yet, not because of energy efficiency.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so if there are any other questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type in your question. We won't answer them right now, but we will have time at the end of the presentations, as I mentioned previously. Our next speaker is coming in from the U.S. Rob Royce is Vice President of Global Governmental Affairs at Guardian Industry Corp, where he's responsible for the company's worldwide government affairs and regulatory activities. Prior to joining the Guardian in 2009, Rob worked as director at the International Legal and Regulatory Affairs for Genworth Financial, which is a former General Electric company. His work in this area includes regulatory activities as well as work in the manufacturing of glass and fabricated glass products for buildings. Rob, I'm going to unmute you now, and if you want to take control of the presentation, you should be able to.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Yep. You can hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
very
good.
good. We can hear you fine, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. So I'll talk briefly today about the importance of policy support for the effective implementation of energy codes, and in part from the perspective of a company that produces green building materials. So first, for background, let me make a very brief introduction of my company, and that's Guardian Industries Corp. And Guardian is a global manufacturing company with leading positions in float glass, fabricated glass products, fiberglass insulation, and other building materials for commercial and residential buildings and for the automotive and solar industries. Our headquarters are located in the state of Michigan in the United States, and we have manufacturing, glass manufacturing operations on 5 continents in nearly 30 countries. And through our Science and Technology Center, Guardian's at the forefront of innovation, including the development of high-performance glass coatings for energy efficiency. And we consider our investment in this area and our ability to produce new innovative coating solutions as really the core aspect of our future success. And today, by capacity, Guardian is the largest producer of coated energy-efficient glass in the world. So, if we can we move to the next slide? I'm having a problem here. Can someone? There we go.
We'll move it, Rob. But just
I'll tell you when.
Yeah, it's better for you to tell us than for us to both try and do it.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward here. So first, public policy support for advanced building systems and materials can help drive investment to establish local and regional manufacturing of efficient technologies. In fact, this policy support is a core consideration when Guardian, and certainly other companies, considers whether to make significant investments in coating technology and equipment in the particular country. As most or everyone on this call knows, marketplaces with vibrant green building sectors depend on various pieces of the puzzle fitting together across the value chain. Developers need to invest in green buildings, and local suppliers need to manufacture goods. And of course, there needs to be demand from people who want to work and live in sustainable buildings. But well-designed policy and regulatory frameworks from the outset are equally critical, especially with regard to attracting local manufacturing of glass and other green building materials as well. And there are, of course, advantages, economic and environmental, to the local manufacture of green building materials. Local manufacturing creates jobs, and it spurs innovation across industries and sectors, having a multiplier effect on economic growth and diversification. And for many products, there are also environmental benefits to the local manufacturer of products. Glass, for example, is heavy to transport, and local manufacturing can reduce the emissions associated with shipments over long distances. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. Thank you. I would now like to highlight and discuss a number of areas where, in our experience, policy and regulatory support for energy codes is especially important. So first, transparency and stakeholder involvement. There should be transparency and stakeholder involvement in how policies and codes are developed on an ongoing basis. And this is important not only to instill confidence, but also to ensure alignment between what the policies and codes require or promote and what manufacturers can and do produce. Some manufacturers require significant time to adapt their processes or to develop new technologies to meet evolving codes. The more manufacturers are involved early in the process, the more technical information they can provide about their products and capabilities, and the more they will support the full implementation of the code. We have seen some examples where countries move forward with code development without such sufficient stakeholder involvement at an early stage. And implementation of a code can then become very challenging because, for example, the lack of availability of the necessary building materials. And then second, to move on, a strong commitment in resources for enforcement. And this is, obviously a critical factor in every country around the world that wants to have a successful code implementation. And we've certainly seen instances in countries where energy codes and policies are adopted, but not enough commitment is made to enforcement. Recognizing, of course, that is raises many different types of challenges and is certainly not easy to overcome, but nonetheless, it is critical. And just to make a few points about this area, I think this is particularly true for high-rise residential and commercial buildings, when an architect's plans can be modeled and found to be code compliant. But someone needs to check to make sure the plans were faithfully followed and to see that specified products were actually used. And to just cite the glass business, which I know best, this verification is especially true in our business, since it's virtually impossible with the naked eye to tell the difference between clear glass and energy-efficient coated glass once it's been installed. And we've certainly seen this problem and still do in some cases in the U.S. And in response, one response has been the development of a standards body called the National Fenestration Rating Council, an independent third-party group, a credible one, which has developed a model that will determine the exact thermal and solar performance of each window, which are called insulated glass units in commercial buildings, based on the rated performance of the window's three components: the coated glass, the frame, and the spacer. And with the results of this model, a building inspector can easily verify that a building contains the energy-efficient glass system that complies with code requirements. As some countries have implemented, one approach to ensure more effective enforcement over the medium to longer term can be to make a code initially mandatory for government or public buildings, and then begin mandatory enforcement of private sector buildings after a transition period. And this staged approach can certainly help prepare the market for a mandatory code that a government wants to enforce more rigorously over time. But the essential point is that the high level of government support and the commitment to apply the necessary resources, people and technology, is required for effective enforcement. And the planning for how a code will be enforced must be foundational in order for a code to have a real impact on the market. We can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So third, market education. And this is an area, again, in our experience, where industries and relevant government agencies and officials can partner to educate key stakeholders within the private and public sectors. The lack of information or inaccurate information is often a major problem behind slow or lack of adoption of more sustainable energy practices. And like these other areas I've talked about at a general level, this education needs to begin at an early stage and must be directed at multiple parties, from government officials to developers and contractors, as well as the general public. It's often surprising, at least from my perspective, working in the glass business, that many people don't recognize that the use of green building materials, including coated or energy-efficient glass, can provide economic savings as well as environmental benefits. So basic educational campaigns can be really critical to the success of energy codes in order to build support and awareness. Excuse me. And then the fourth point, and this will be the last point that I'll highlight today, is really drawing from best practices and lessons learned. There will, of course, always be differences between energy codes and policies among countries and regions, and even within the same country, due to climate differences or other factors, whether they're economic, cultural, or otherwise. But there are opportunities, certainly, to draw and benefit from international best practices. And I'll make some specific points in this regard, in particular relating to ways that harmonization of codes can provide real benefits. So first, the first point, though, is it's critical that government regulations and standards do not create unnecessary barriers to trade by erecting certification or other requirements that lack a sound basis and do not facilitate trade, especially at a regional level. And second, to the point on harmonization, some harmonization of codes, especially at a country and certainly where possible at a regional level, can bring benefits. Such areas can include references to existing international standards as well as on issues relating to certification and testing. And agencies such as the IEA can play a critical role in advising and providing support in this area to identify areas where there can be harmonization and identifying best practices. And my third point here, from the perspective of a building material supplier, when we talk about harmonization or best practices, it's often advantageous to provide similar products for similar climate areas and regions. And it should be recognized the need to adjust manufacturing processes to meet large numbers of distinct requirements in a single region or within a country can add cost and reduce efficiencies to manufacturing, which ultimately increases price. And finally, a code that is harmonized in basic ways can also more easily facilitate the transfer of lessons learned, as code development adoption is a continuous process that requires updating and improvements. So with that, of course, I only touched upon a few points, and I didn't address in any detail some of the broader policy implications of fuel subsidies and such, which raise a different set of challenges. But I just wanted to end on, in my view, as again from the private sector, recognizing the importance of the partnerships with the IEA and directly with between governments, and particularly governments that have significant experience with codes, and how that can bring productive benefits and really ultimately a more successful code implementation process. So with that, I've concluded my brief presentation here, but I would be happy to talk about any issues, or Mark, if you want to add anything, given your experience in this area, please do.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. Mark, did you have a comment you want to make? Please also be reminded, if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand or send your questions in to us.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. That's a very good presentation, and thanks for articulating some key details about how the transparency of government and policies, how that can affect manufacturers and investment and participation, and ultimately the effective implementation of building codes. So in our building envelope roadmap, we discussed these types of elements in quite detail about how there would be participation from various elements, including manufacturers. And one of the things that we talk about also is if part of the one of the benefits coming out of high-performance building materials is that industry, of course, can make additional profit from selling value-added, high-performance, cost-effective materials. And so part of it is to establish some of these key elements of capacity building and harmonization of building codes. I guess we look to see that it's going to require funding from multiple elements, whether it be government or developmental banks, and of course potentially manufacturers. So I know that Dr. Patana will follow you, and he also has some reference slides about the work being done in the APEC test center in Thailand. But maybe you could mention a few more comments about what do you need, what would industry need to see from government or from other entities before they're willing to invest in some of this infrastructure and this education capacity? What are the things that policy people need to be aware of or to try to strive for that would actually acquire the funding from industry?
Thanks, Mark, for that. And I guess there's no probably one answer to that, but when we're looking at a market and we're considering, particularly on the coding technology, which is a significant, $50, $60 million investment just for, initial coder, we'll look, first at the level of governmental prioritization of energy efficiency, and specifically, below that, high priority, what are the steps that, relevant government agencies are taking to start building the knowledge and the infrastructure that will be required to, really implement an energy code. And that's in addition, of course, to, when we look at any country to make any investment, we want to make sure that there is the fundamentals to support an investment, that there's the right, growth and demand in the building sector, that's a given. But again, turning back to the coding technology, I think, it's really that level of governmental prioritization and, at least the beginnings of, real concrete steps on developing, a code framework, with indications that it's not going to be just adopted, but also implemented, with the necessary resources. So that's really, something that we look at very closely.
Okay, thanks, Rob. We have a similar comment coming in from Atuf Sayed, who says that he agrees on the need for harmonization of codes, but is also aware of the practice in many developing countries of adopting codes from developed countries, often with international aid. His comment is that these type of codes usually are too complex for developing countries and often result in negligible enforcement. Maybe you'd like to say something along the lines of this, if you have any experience in this area, or if you think there's some institutional needs we should be working on to help address this difference between code setting in developed countries and developing countries.
2 points on that. I'm sorry, that's a great point, so thank you for that question, and I'll make 2 brief points. One, I think it's important, when I say harmonization, or when someone refers to harmonization, it's important to identify what that really means. It doesn't mean taking wholesale a code from, U.S. or Europe or wherever and just simply adopting that. There needs to be, further work in identifying, what types of harmonization make sense. And again, I think that's the sort of foundational work that needs to be done. And second, to the point of just adopting a code from another country, certainly that doesn't, help in terms of implementation. That's kind of an easy step to take, to just adopt a code from another country. I think codes have to evolve, and that was to my point of early stakeholder involvement. I think codes have to be realistic, and they have to be developed in a way that makes sense for that market, because the markets are going to want to have local building materials. If it's not realistic, it's not going to drive the process forward. So I think, as I say, making it real is fundamentally critical.
Okay, this is Mark. Thank you, Rob. I would just add another element to this, and everything you said I agree 100% with. One thing that we're very clear in the guidance that's been put out by the IEA in our publications is that these building codes have to be developed in consideration of regional and cultural and building practices. And I think your point about a regional harmonization makes sense. I think the other element that the question raised was the sophistication of the level of the building code. And I think in some cases it's inevitable that we want to see people move to more sophisticated codes, but it has to be done in an appropriate manner. So for example, a mandatory code for everybody could have the simplest level of compliance and maybe be more prescriptive based, but then let's say if you have a voluntary measure for high performance buildings that includes incentives, for example, that could possibly have a more sophisticated level of compliance which would require potentially simulation or building testing or other elements to it. So I think we need to keep in mind that it's not one size fits all. You can have one level of sophistication for mandatory policies for everybody, and then more sophistication for some of the advanced building guidelines and the advanced voluntary measures. And I think by managing through all that in cooperation with industry and with local and international experts, the whole thing can be managed. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Rob. We'll next go on to our next presentation from Dr. Patana Rajwanswat. He's joining us from Thailand, where he's Dean for the School of Energy, Environment and Materials at King Mongset University of Technology, Thonburi. His research at the university is in the field of building energy sciences and energy efficiency, particularly related to energy efficient glazing and infrared reflective pigments. His work at the university also has involved and shared in the lead of the revision of Thailand's building energy code, as well as the establishment of higher energy performance standards for building envelope materials. So I will unmute you now, and okay, c'est bon. If you'd like to take control of the announcement, Dr. Patana.
Oh, thank you. Hi, good afternoon from Bangkok to everyone. I'm not sure I can handle. Let me try to check if I can take a control on the slide. Okay. I'm not sure I could take control on this slide. Could you take control for me?
Okay.
Hello.
Can you try your space bar?
Can I try one more time? Yeah.
Yes.
I cannot. Could you please do that for me?
Okay, so we'll do it for you.
Okay. All right. Could you please, the first slide. Yeah. I'm not, I will give you a presentation today to give a broad view of how capacity building would influence the green building economy. And I would like to start with, some statistic of the increasing of energy consumption. But I think for the information like statistic like this, Mark already gave the information to you all, so that we all know that energy consumption is keep increasing due to the population and the higher demand of energy required for industry and everyday life. Well, then we face a very huge crisis about the environmental problem, climate change because of greenhouse gas emission. During 1970s, we already have a problem of energy crisis. Now we have more energy problem. So all over the world, we know that we have agreed, I think, energy efficiency is seen to be a prominent and a promising pathway to ease energy environment crisis. I think everyone now knows and agree on this statement. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Hello. Okay. Well, from statistics, we know that building consumption, residential and commercial buildings consumes about 37 of the world's final energy consumption. This is huge. If we have the way to improve energy efficiency of these sector, would affect a lot on the reduction of energy consumption and also the greenhouse gas emission. And if we go more detail, we learn that buildings, most of them, especially in Thailand or in ASEAN, which are hot and humid zone, we learn that the aircon would buildings takes about 50 or 60% of for air conditioning systems. Later, following that, is lighting system would take probably 25 to 30%. This is done. This is I think this is something that we are confident. We have done a lot of audits in many buildings. I think everyone's now, especially in Thailand, agree on this one. So I think if you would like to do to reduce the energy consumption effectively and efficiently, I think two major areas that we should focus on, which is aircon and lighting. And if we take a look further in the aircon, we know that influence of building envelope has big influence on the requirement of the aircon energy consumption. And if we improve building envelope so well, it's good enough, that would reduce the energy consumption in the aircon system tremendously. And that's because the size will be smaller, and then consumption and the power requirement for those systems will be much smaller. And then, we're going to get the benefit of the energy reduction in the system. What I'm trying to say is aircon system, lighting system, and building envelope play a very significant role on the energy reduction. Next slide, please. This is the one I captured the front page of the report done by IEA, which is marketed the author, and the which is Technology Roadmap, Energy Efficient Building Envelopes. I really appreciate this report very much. It's clearly emphasized that building envelopes affect a lot on enhancement of the building envelope thermal performance would enhance, would reduce energy consumption tremendously. Well, we have, right now we in 2014. I think in the past we have learned a lot and developed so much advanced technology for building envelope and also lighting and aircon system. But I think, in my view, I think those technology, state-of-the-art technology is quite available off the shelf, and then we can buy those products to install in the building to enhance energy efficiency. And I think, and in my view, I think the more important thing besides the energy technology that we have, we would think of, we should have a good to drive a policy that drives energy efficiency. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think this is the theory. Theoretically, I think the driving mechanism towards the energy efficiency for buildings or for anything, I think there are two things: push mechanism and pull mechanism. I think all over, in many countries in ASEAN, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, and many other, Japan, they have both mechanisms to drive energy efficiency. Push mechanism is to, eliminate a system or equipment with poor energy performance. For example, in Thailand, we have had building energy code to set the minimum requirement for building, energy requirement for buildings since 1992. That's the first version, and we have the revision of the building energy code in 2007, just recently, and then we try to implement that one in a full scale. And also, for example, we have Ministry of Energy this is example from Thailand. Ministry of Energy work together with the Ministry of Industry to set up minimum energy performance of the minimum energy performance standards for industrial products, such as aircon system, microwave ovens, stuff like that. That is something about push mechanism that's just, moving towards the energy efficiency. Pull mechanism, I think, is some sort of voluntary programs. This is to put the higher energy performance standards that could enhance the energy efficiency as a whole. Well, in Thailand, for example, we have had this program, and then we have run this one by Ministry of Energy for, I think, at least 15 years. We have a strong building labeling system. We have a very strong electrical appliances labeling system, and then this is done by the government. it might not be natural enough, but I think the government trying to push this way. I hope in the near future this one could be truly or natural, true market driven. That's I will talk about that later. And we in many countries, I think they have put a lot of money, some budget drawn from some fund to get to promote the use of energy efficient home appliances or to drive to build energy efficient buildings. Next slide, please. Many people involved. I think we need people. We need professionals to drive to involved in the building energy efficient buildings. To achieve energy efficiency of buildings, so we need good building design, we need energy efficient equipment, we need good energy management, we need renewable energy, especially daylighting and also photovoltaic technology. We need to enhance awareness and also behavioral changes. And we also need legislation. If we have all of this, all of elements, I think we could move energy efficiency in any place more efficiently and effectively. And we need people, mature technologists, architect, building scientist, technology developer, building manager, auditor, consultant, energy economist, and so on to drive this. This is something about capacity building that we talk about today. And then I think, for example, in Thailand, for at least almost 20 years of having Energy Conservation Act, Energy Conservation Promotion Act, we have done a lot on giving education to people, to produce professionals to run the energy efficiency economy. But in my view, I think those, for the state-of-the-art technology and the basic energy efficient design, something like that, I think it's quite mature. But for the maturity of these technology and people, it's a foundation of green building economy. Next slide, please. Well, so far, particularly in Thailand, many university colleges, provide educational programs, in the levels from the level of diploma, undergrad, graduate program, especially in School of Energy, Environment, and Material, King Mongkut University of Technology, Thonburi. We have had this one for 38 for the 39 years, and we serve Ministry of Energy to doing so. We also provide educational program for particularly in energy efficiency technology and energy management. That's based on single and multiple disciplinary program. And we also have intensive and professional trainings. This year I have seen a lot of private sector that set up business to provide professional training to enhance the capacity of people to have knowledge and expertise in energy efficiency technology. And this probably for the past few years, I think there is a higher demands in workforce on energy efficiency, and that's because I think the basic reason behind this is because the policy, the good policy, for example, for compulsory program for designated building, the building that's large size, that consume more than 1 megawatt of that require more than megawatt of power requirement. They need to have people who are responsible for energy management in each building. This is a mandatory thing in Thailand. So people, there will be higher demand of these people. So this is a chance for doing a lot of different level to create, to enhance the capacity building in our country. And especially AEC will be commenced next year, and that will be opportunity for people in ASEAN to look for the job related to the energy efficiency in this country. So there will be a good career path of this professional in this area. Next slide, please. Well, this is would be the last slide related to building capacity building, which is challenges under green building economy. To drive energy efficiency economy sustainably, this is a good big statement from me. I said true market-driven business must exist instead of relying only on governmental subsidy programs. This is, I think, in my view, is important. Because right now, if we rely only on the budget from the government, sometimes you're not lucky enough to get good budget to drive this one. Then the energy efficiency program in each, country or in each sector would be stopped. And then I think to get this one, true market economy would be necessary to drive, to exist. And since the high investment is always required for energy efficient buildings, therefore I think we need people who get good money. I said banks and financial institutions must play a role as a big stakeholders to offer the soft loan for those who want to create the energy efficient building. And this requires a lot of many areas of professionals, auditor, and if that building would like to get labels, for example, leads from America, TGNB from Germany, CASB from Japan, stuff like that. So this is important for. This is a opportunity for those who expert in building design or auditor, certifier, stuff like that. And bank could enjoy a new product to give a soft loan. And this is one of the most important, that is a closing statement for me. It's a life cycle cost should be employed for justifying the loan instead of a payback term. I have talked to people, for the 5-6 years, the past 5-6 years. I'm trying to say that, if we get stuck on the payback, we cannot have a good chance to go to the full green building economy. That is my view. Thank you very much. This is for the capacity building. But Mark would like to ask. Mark asked me yesterday to ask me to add a little more about the movement on the establishment of building material testing and certification center in Thailand. Could you please move to slides forward, please? Forward, 2 slides forward, please. Forward, not backward, please. Forward. Yeah, there are more updates on building material testing and certification center in Thailand. Next slide, please. Well, I will spend a few minutes, 2 minutes, no more than that. Well, get back to the year 2011. We got the we got the funding from APEC to run the first APEC workshop on building energy efficiency, and that one was focused on establishment of the building material testing and certification center. And then that one, Thailand, and especially by me, who has done a lot on the building material testing. So I propose that we are committed to establishing the building material testing and certification center. Since then, we have done so many things related to this establishment. And then in October 2013, we hold a second workshop this is because of, to establish the building testing and certification center, we need to create to enhance the capacity of the building, of people. So we hold a second workshop to related to training program. Next slide, please. We run the workshop on simulation programs for rating the windows and doors and building envelope. So I think we got the experts from the U.S., from Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, and the consultant, Mr. Bipin Shah and Dr. Charlie, to come and give a lecture and provide and hands-on training, and then that was very successful. And then we also make a clear plan to move forward for establishing the building testing and building material testing and certification center. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in this year, we try to get the lab, the testing lab that we have right now to be certified by ISO 17025, and we're trying to, add some critical equipment that's required for evaluate the performance of facing and building other building materials. And we worked together with the Ministry of Energy to develop a rating and labeling processes. In the past, we have done the labeling scheme for building envelope, such as building envelope materials such as glazing, insulation, and roof ties, for example. And next year, I think if we have a chance, oh, by the way, by this year, I hope that if we get ISO 17025 certified, we're going to celebrate and open the testing center officially. And in next year, we try to get more money to add more heavy equipment into the testing center. And next slide, please. This is very important. We not only get the support from the ministry, we also get the support from our university, U.S. Department of Energy. More importantly, we get a good support from private sector like AGC, Guardian, Thai German, in short, TGSG, which is the abbreviation of the Thai German Specialty Glass, 3M, and other companies, other Thai building material companies. I think that's all for the update. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bhatana. Once again, for all you listening, we can take questions if you raise your hand or type them in. We have one more brief presentation by Mark on general IEA building activities. But I'll let maybe Mark ask a question now. And
yeah. Okay. Thanks, John, and thank you, Dr. Bhatana, for the great presentation. And I know that you did show the building envelope roadmap. I want to be on the record that I did not request that, and you did that on your own. So some of my colleagues here are not necessarily believing me. But no, that was good, of course. I think when we look at moving forward, I know in the past with some of the workshops, the funding that you received from APEC, it allowed for participants from some of the regional countries to be able to come in. And to me, if there's anybody on the line, from the different countries, if you want to make a comment, I mean, obviously it's great to get the funding to participate in these events, but at some point in time, that type of funding may not be available, and being able to get countries to, self-support at least the participation of their policy people and their technical people to be able to get larger audiences to participate in these training events. I think we're going to have to find a way to be able to leverage the domestic resources along with getting as much international funding as we can. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that there were many regional participants involved, and if there's anybody that wants to make a comment about how they can participate in these types of events in the future and sponsor these events or work with these events, if not from a financial standpoint, at least from an in-kind standpoint. So, okay. Well, anyway, but thank you so much. Very good presentations, and thank everybody. So as far as discussing the next steps, I do not have a formal presentation, but I'd just like to say that when you do get the download the link to download the presentation so you can look at them again, we do have that one slide from the IEA that talks about potential future projects. One of them directly linked to today's subject is the capacity building. I think you know, actually between all three speakers, they all touch base on some levels of capacity building. But if you want to provide us your feedback as to what you think is one of the highest priorities that the IEA should try to facilitate and work with others to promote, that would be very helpful. And today we talked mostly about the ASEAN region, but certainly there's many other regions such as India and China, along with things in you know, Latin America and South America that I know the people probably aren't on the line, of course, because of the time. But we have this evaluation form where you can give us feedback on the presentations, but also there's an element there where you can type in and write to us what you think the priorities should be, and any kind of nuance or details that we should focus on would be very helpful to get feedback from the participants today. So if we don't have any questions, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. Okay. So this form that we have on the screen right now, this has been sent to everybody, and if you did not receive this form, then please email us back or give us feedback, and we'll get it to you. So I want to thank the speakers. You know, this is the first time we've done this with the different regions of the world on this new system we have in place, and although we had a few little glitches on some of the transition for slides, I think it worked out fairly well overall, and I'm very grateful for the three speakers to participate and share their expertise with us and their vision as to how we can move forward. I think it's very grateful. I also want to thank my colleague John Dulac for moderating the whole session, and we look forward to working with you, and so thank you for taking the time to tune into our webinar, and look forward to our future webinars, Webinar 3 coming out and Webinar 4. We'll be sending out notices for those in the coming few days for Webinar 3, and then hopefully within a week for Webinar 4. So please sign up for them and share the feedback. So thank you so much.
Good. All right, thanks very much, Mark, and thank you to all of our participants. Again, just as a reminder, if you'd like any further information on any of the publications that were mentioned today, as well as information on the 2 webinars that have taken place and the upcoming 3rd webinar, to visit the IEA's webpage. And with that, we hope to see you all next time for our 3rd webinar.